You married a waiter? Pathetic. That's what my sister said to me the night I introduced my husband to the family. Not gonna lie, those words stung so deep I felt like the air got punched right out of my chest. You know that moment when you're standing in a room full of people you grew up with, people who are supposed to have your back, and instead they're laughing at you? Yeah, that was me. She didn't just whisper it either, she said it loud enough so my mom, my dad, even our cousins could hear. And the worst part? Nobody stood up for me. Nobody said, "Hey, that's out of line." They just let it hang there, like an ugly banner stretched across the room. I remember looking at my husband. Back then he was still my fiancé, and he gave me this small smile, the kind of smile that says, "Don't worry about it." I'm used to people like her. That broke me even more, because I realized this wasn't the first time he'd been dismissed, judged, shoved into a corner because of what he did for a living. And here's the thing, he didn't deserve that. Not even close. See, my sister, let's call her Amanda, always thought she was above everyone else. She had the job, the car, the fancy condo downtown. She dated guys in suits who drove German cars and flashed Rolex watches at dinner parties. To her, status was everything. And me? I never played that game. I wanted love. I wanted someone who saw me for me. And truth is, I found that in Daniel. Yeah, Daniel worked as a waiter. He wore the uniform, carried trays, smiled through rude customers, and counted tips at the end of the night. But let me tell you something. Behind that job was the kindest, most hard-working man I'd ever met. He didn't just bring me flowers. He remembered which ones my grandmother used to plant in her garden. He didn't just listen when I talked. He heard me, every word, even the things I didn't say. That's the man Amanda mocked. That's the man my family looked down on. You ever notice how family can be the quickest to cut you deepest? Strangers might insult you and it bounces off. But when it's blood, when it's your sister, it slices straight through. I kept hearing her voice echo in my head. Pathetic. And I hated that part of me actually believed it for a second. For a long time growing up, Amanda was the star. She got the lead roles in school plays, the awards, the spotlight. And me, I was the shadow. I learned to be quiet, to keep my head down. I thought maybe adulthood would change that. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Every holiday turned into a showcase for Amanda's success. She'd roll up in her luxury SUV, arms loaded with gifts, talking about her latest promotion. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs, trying to save, trying to build something real. When I finally found happiness, she acted like it was a joke. Like love only counted if it came with a 6-figure salary. That night, after she said it, I laughed it off. I had to. But when we got home, I cried. Daniel sat with me on the couch, no judgment, just quiet strength. He said, "Someday they'll see. You don't have to defend me, because life will." And I swear, in that moment, I believed him. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I felt it in my bones. Life was going to prove him right. And guess what? It did. But before I tell you what happened, let me paint the picture of just how bad things got. Amanda made it her mission to remind me of my so-called mistake. She'd call me randomly just to brag about her boyfriend's new job. She'd say things like, "Oh, how's Daniel? Still serving people fries? Cute." She didn't even try to hide the venom. My parents? They didn't help much. They'd nod awkwardly, sometimes even chuckle, like they didn't want to choose sides. And I kept swallowing it over and over until resentment built up like a knot in my chest. You ever had that happen? Where you're too polite to fight back, so the anger just sits there burning? Yeah, that was me. And Daniel, God bless him, he never lashed out. He kept working doubles, saving money, supporting us. He'd come home exhausted, smelling like grilled steak and dish soap, but still asking about my day like it was the only thing that mattered. That's love. That's real. But Amanda couldn't see it. Or maybe she refused to. To her, he was just a waiter, and I was pathetic for marrying him. She didn't know that the man she mocked would one day hold her fate in his hands. She didn't know that the tables were going to turn in the cruelest way possible. And trust me, when that moment came, it wasn't pretty. It was almost a year later when the cracks in Amanda's perfect world started to show, though of course at first she pretended everything was fine. That's what she always did, hide the mess behind a polished smile and a designer bag. But little whispers started coming through the family grapevine. My cousin mentioned she'd seen Amanda's car get repossessed outside her condo. Another relative hinted she'd been missing payments on her place. I didn't want to believe it, Not because I cared about her lifestyle, but because Amanda had built her whole identity on being untouchable. If that facade collapsed, I knew she'd spiral. And sure enough, it did. One night, my phone buzzed at nearly midnight. It was Amanda. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. Her voice was different. Not sharp and mocking, but cracked, trembling. "I need help," she whispered. At first, I thought she meant emotional support. But then she started talking fast. Words tumbling over each other. Lawsuits, debts, credit cards maxed out. Her boyfriend bailing on her when things got tough. Suddenly, the woman who mocked me for marrying a pathetic waiter was sobbing into the phone, begging me to lend her money. And not just a little, she wanted thousands. I sat there in the dark, staring at Daniel, who had just come home from another long shift. His uniform still smelled like coffee and garlic bread. He raised an eyebrow, silently asking what was going on. I mouthed, "It's Amanda." His jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. The silence stretched between us, while Amanda kept rambling on the other end. "Please, you have to help me. You're my sister. You can't just leave me like this. Everyone else has turned their back on me." That last part hit me, because for years she was the one turning her back on us. She was the one laughing while I cried, calling my marriage a joke. And now she was the one begging. You ever had that moment where life feels like it's setting up the stage for some kind of twisted justice? Yeah, that's what this felt like. But it wasn't over. The real storm came 2 weeks later. Amanda showed up at our door. No warning, no call, just pounding fists on the wood at 7 in the morning. When I opened it, she looked nothing like the sister I knew. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes, God, her eyes were swollen from crying. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, collapsed on our couch, and just broke down. Between sobs, she spilled everything. Her boyfriend had left her for another woman. The condo was gone. She had nowhere to stay, no money, no friends willing to take her in. She was at rock bottom, and in her mind, I was the only lifeline left. My parents found out soon after, and of course they started calling me nonstop. "She's your sister," my mom said. "You can't abandon her now. Family helps family. Family helps family." Funny how that rule never applied when Daniel and I were struggling, scraping by while Amanda mocked us. Back then, nobody offered to help with rent. Nobody cared that Daniel worked himself to exhaustion to keep us afloat. But suddenly, because Amanda was drowning, we were supposed to throw her a life raft. And here's the thing, I wanted to. Deep down, I still wanted to be the good sister, the one who forgives. But every time I looked at Daniel, I saw the years of disrespect he endured. I saw the smirk on Amanda's face when she called him just a waiter. And I thought, why is it always us who have to bend? Why is it always us who have to carry the burden? Daniel didn't push me either way. That's not who he is. But one night, as we sat in our tiny kitchen eating reheated pasta, he finally spoke. "You know," he said quietly, "helping her won't erase what she did to us. It won't make her respect you or me. It'll just tell her that no matter how badly she treats you, you'll always be there to clean up the mess." I just stared at him, because he was right. And it tore me apart, because I knew what Amanda expected, that we'd swoop in, fix everything, save her. She assumed it, the way she always assumed she was entitled to more than the rest of us. But this time felt different. This time we actually had the power to choose. And trust me, the choice we made would change everything. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening when my parents insisted we all meet at their house to talk this out like a family. I knew what that meant. They wanted Daniel and me to cave, to reach into the little savings we'd scraped together and hand it over to Amanda as if we owed her that. Walking into my parents' living room, I could feel the tension buzzing like static in the air. Amanda was already there, sitting on the couch with tissues piled around her. Her eyes darted up when we walked in, red-rimmed and pleading. But even then, I could still see the trace of arrogance buried underneath, like she assumed the outcome was inevitable. My mom poured tea, trying to act like this was just another family chat, but her hands shook as she set the cups down. My dad cleared his throat and got straight to the point. "Your sister is in trouble. We can't help her financially, but you two, you've been careful with your money. She needs a place to stay, some support, maybe even a loan until she gets back on her feet." He said it like it was a given, like Daniel and I had been saving just for this moment. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat quietly, listening as Amanda finally spoke. Look, I know I've said things in the past, things I shouldn't have, but I'm still your sister. You can't just let me sink. I'll pay you back, I swear. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for a second I almost softened. But then I looked at Daniel. He was sitting straight-backed, hands folded in his lap, calm but firm. He didn't even glance at me. He was staring directly at Amanda. Do you even remember what you said to her the night we got engaged? He asked. Amanda blinked, thrown off. What are you talking about? You called her pathetic. You called me pathetic. And you laughed about it in front of everyone, Daniel said, his tone even but sharp enough to cut through the air. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to deny it, but she didn't. We all knew it was true. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom shifted uncomfortably, my dad coughed, but no one defended her. Amanda finally muttered, "That was a joke." "You're really going to hold on to that?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. It wasn't a joke to her. It wasn't a joke to me. Every sneer, every insult, you built yourself up by tearing us down. And now, when you're the one who's fallen, you expect us to carry you? His words hit like a hammer. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger, but from the weight of years' worth of buried pain being spoken out loud. Amanda's lip trembled. She turned to me then, reaching for my hand, her voice desperate. "Please, you're my sister. You can't just stand there and watch me lose everything. You're better than that." And that's when it clicked. For so long, I thought being better meant forgiving endlessly, bending over backwards, sacrificing myself to keep the family peace. But in that moment, I realized being better meant protecting myself, protecting Daniel, protecting the life we'd built without letting her poison seep in again. I pulled my hand back slowly. "Amanda," I said quietly, "you made it clear for years that I was nothing, that Daniel was nothing. You laughed while we struggled. You called our marriage a mistake. And now you want us to erase all of that because you're scared? I can't." Her face crumpled as if the floor had vanished beneath her. She shook her head, tears streaming down. "You don't mean that. You can't mean that." My mom jumped in, panic in her voice. "Sweetheart, please think about what you're saying. She's family. If you turn your back now, she may never recover." And then my dad added, "One day you might regret this. One day you might need her." I almost laughed. Need her? When had Amanda ever been there for me? When had she ever lifted a finger to help? My whole life had been a lesson in standing on my own because my family was too busy applauding Amanda. Daniel finally stood, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at me first, his eyes steady, asking without words if I was sure. And I nodded. Then he turned back to Amanda, his voice low but unshakable. "You said a waiter wasn't good enough. Well, tonight it's the waiter who gets to decide. And my answer is no." The words hung heavy in the air. My mom gasped like he'd just cursed in church. My dad sat back, stunned. Amanda stared at him like she'd just been slapped. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You can't just let me drown." Daniel took my hand then, and together we walked toward the door. Before we left, I turned back one last time. "You mocked the very love that could have saved you. Don't expect us to forget that now." And with that, we left her sitting there, tears staining her face, the weight of reality finally crashing down. But even as we drove home, the air thick with unspoken relief and guilt, I knew this wasn't the end. Choices like that have consequences, and some of them are heavier than you can ever imagine. When we walked out of that living room, the slam of the door behind us felt like thunder. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being silenced. I was the one who had spoken. But freedom doesn't always come with relief. The car ride home was quiet, the kind of quiet where thoughts scream louder than words. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel and the other on mine, steady, reassuring, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He didn't regret it, I knew that much, but he also knew what came next. Families don't forgive rebellion easily. The phone call started the next morning. First my mom, voice heavy with guilt trips. "She didn't sleep last night. How could you walk away like that?" Then my dad, sterner. "You're breaking this family apart. We raised you better than this." I didn't answer them. I couldn't. Every message they left felt like another chain trying to pull me back into the cycle I'd finally broken. By the end of the week, it wasn't just my parents. Cousins started texting, some siding with Amanda, some whispering they understood but couldn't say so out loud. At work, I caught myself staring at my phone every hour, bracing for another wave of accusations. And the thing is, Amanda didn't stop. She showed up at our apartment 2 nights later, banging on the door until neighbors peeked out into the hallway. "Are you really going to do this to me?" she screamed through the wood. "I'm your sister." "He's just a waiter." "You're choosing him over blood?" The words stabbed, not because they were true, but because she still believed them. Even at rock bottom, Amanda couldn't see Daniel for who he was. She only saw what he wasn't. Daniel stood behind me, arms crossed, calm but immovable. He didn't flinch, didn't rise to her shouting. He just said, "Don't open it." And I didn't. I leaned against the door, listening as her voice cracked, turned from rage to begging, then to sobs that trailed down the hallway until silence swallowed them whole. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between the echo of her cries and the memory of her laughter when she humiliated me. Was I cruel for letting her suffer? Or was I finally being fair? The next family gathering was Easter, and walking into that house was like walking into a courtroom. Eyes followed us, whispers buzzed in the corners. Amanda wasn't there. Word was she'd moved in temporarily with an old friend, but her shadow stretched across every conversation. My mom barely looked at me. My dad shook Daniel's hand stiffly, like it burned him. At dinner, one of my uncles finally said what everyone else was thinking. "So, you're just gonna let your sister rot while you two sit pretty? That's cold." Daniel put down his fork, looked him straight in the eye, and said calmly, "Respect isn't free. She spent years tearing us down. If we keep saving her, she'll never change." The table fell silent. Some nodded reluctantly, others scowled, and me? I felt a strange mix of shame and pride. Shame because I was raised to believe family was everything. Pride because for once, Daniel's voice wasn't dismissed. It carried weight. But consequences don't end at the dinner table. Word spread through the extended family like wildfire. Suddenly, I was the selfish one, the ungrateful daughter, the sister who turned her back. Invitations stopped coming. A cousin uninvited me from her wedding. My parents visited less, their calls curt and strained. It hurt, not gonna lie. Losing family feels like losing pieces of yourself. But at the same time, I started noticing something else. For the first time, Daniel and I had peace. No more snide comments at holidays, no more whispers about his job, no more constant measuring ourselves against Amanda's glittering facade. Our little apartment, cluttered and small as it was, felt like a sanctuary. We cooked together, laughed together, built a world where love mattered more than money. And I realized maybe that's what scared Amanda most. She had chased status her whole life, and still she ended up alone. We had nothing but each other, and somehow we were winning. But the story didn't end there. One evening, months later, I got another call. This time it wasn't Amanda. It was my mother, her voice low, almost broken. "Your sister's in the hospital," she said. My heart clenched. For a moment, guilt surged, heavy and choking. Was this because we refused to help? Did we push her too far? Mom didn't give details, just said Amanda needed us, begged us to come. Daniel watched me as I hung up the phone, his eyes steady, waiting for my decision. And that's where the real test began. It wasn't just about saying no once in a living room. It was about what kind of people we were going to be when life demanded an answer again. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet despair, the kind of place where time slowed down and every footstep echoed like judgment. Daniel and I walked through the sliding doors together. My stomach knotted so tight I thought I might be sick. I hadn't seen Amanda in months, not since that night at our door when she screamed about blood being thicker than water. Part of me hoped she'd still have some of that fire, that she'd be herself enough to argue, to fight. But when we stepped into her room, what I saw wasn't the sister I grew up with. It was a hollow version. Frail under thin white sheets, her once perfect hair matted, her eyes sunken but still sharp enough to land on me with a mix of desperation and something close to shame. "You came," she whispered like it was a surprise. My mom sat in the corner, clutching a tissue, eyes swollen from crying. My dad stood stiff against the wall, arms crossed like his whole body was a defense mechanism. The moment I stepped closer to the bed, Amanda reached for my hand. Her grip was weak, trembling, but her words still carried that old urgency. "Please, don't let them cut me out. Don't let me lose everything." At first, I thought she meant her health. Then she explained between shallow breaths. She was facing bankruptcy, lawsuits, everything closing in, and she needed me to co-sign, to be her safety net one last time. Even there, lying in a hospital bed, she still saw me as her bailout. Daniel moved closer, his presence a steady weight at my side. He didn't say anything, but his silence was louder than any words. Amanda's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time I saw something I never expected. Fear. She knew the decision wasn't just mine anymore, it was ours. And we weren't the same people she mocked. Amanda, I said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. All these years you made me feel small. You laughed at my marriage, at the man who has stood by me through everything. And now, when the tables have turned, you're asking me to save you again. Do you realize you've never once saved me? Her lip trembled, tears spilling down her face. I was wrong, she whispered. I was so wrong. But please, you're all I have left. My mom jumped in, voice sharp with pleading. She's your sister. Don't be cruel. Show mercy. My dad added, family doesn't turn their backs. I looked at Daniel, his hand warm in mine, grounding me. Then I looked back at Amanda. And for the first time, I didn't see the glamorous sister who used to shine brighter than me. I saw a woman who built her whole life on sand, and now the tide had come in. I'm not turning my back, I said finally. I'm just not sacrificing my life for someone who never valued mine. If you want to change, you'll have to do it without me carrying you. Amanda's face crumpled, her sobs filling the sterile room. My mother gasped. My father shook his head, but Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered, that's the truth she needed to hear. We walked out of that hospital room, leaving behind the echoes of her cries. The weight of generations of guilt pressing down, but not breaking us this time. Outside, the night air hit my face like a baptism. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because Amanda was suffering, but because I had finally chosen us, Daniel and me, over the endless cycle of sacrifice. People talk about family like it's unbreakable, like blood is the ultimate bond. But here's the thing, blood means nothing if it poisons you. Love is the bond that saves you. Respect is the thread that holds you together. And for once, I chose love and respect over fear and guilt. As we drove home, Daniel reached over, laced his fingers through mine and smiled. You know, he said quietly, waiters see everything. People think they're invisible, but they're the ones who notice the truth. I looked at him, realizing he wasn't just talking about his job. He was talking about us, about how he had seen through Amanda's games long before I ever did. And I knew he was right. We weren't invisible anymore. We weren't pathetic. We were free. But as we pulled into our driveway, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a photo of Amanda, smiling weakly from her hospital bed, with a single line of text. You'll regret this when the will is read.